And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, January 16th. I am the host for today's program, Paul DeMain. And many of the stories we read here can also be found at our website, IndianCountryNews.com. And here are some of the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. The National Park Service has restored graffiti on Alcatraz that was painted during the island's occupation by Native Americans in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The graffiti, which is on a roughly 10-acre tall water tower on the island's northern end, reads, "Peace and freedom, welcome home of the free Indian land," in red, capital letters up to 5 feet tall. It had faded and was barely visible before the Park Service undertook a $1.5 million restoration of the rusting tower, according to the San Francisco Chronicle. The graffiti was restored 6 weeks ago by a Ute who was among the island's occupiers. "It is something that people expect to see," said Marcus Conan, site supervisor for Alcatraz. "When you see this graffiti, when you walk off the boat, it opens your eyes to the Indian story of the island." Alcatraz in San Francisco Bay is best known as the site of a former U.S. penitentiary, but was the home of some of the country's most notorious inmates. But a band of American Indians who wanted to turn it into an Indian cultural center, a university devoted to Native studies, occupied the island in 1969 after the prison closed. Many of the original occupiers eventually left, and the government retook Alcatraz in June of 1971. The Park Service took over its management the following year, and it has since become a major tourist draw. Idle No More is calling for a World Day of Action on January 28th at Twitter under hashtag J28. This day of action will peacefully protest attacks on democracy, indigenous sovereignty, human rights, and environmental protections. The organization posts that as a grassroots movement, clearly no political organization speaks for Idle No More. This movement is of the people, for the people. The vision of Idle No More revolves around indigenous ways of knowledge rooted in indigenous sovereignty to protect water, air, land, and all creation for future generations. The conservative government bills, beginning with Bill C-45, threaten treaties and this indigenous vision of sovereignty, as do actions by state and federal governments in the U.S. and other countries where indigenous people reside. The goal of the movement is education and the revitalization of indigenous peoples through awareness and empowerment, and encouraging knowledge through indigenous sovereignty and environmental protections. Idle No More urges the governments, wherever they are, to repeal all legislations which violate treaties, indigenous sovereignty, and subsequently environmental protections over the land and water. Nebraska's Omaha tribe has reopened its flood-damaged Iowa casino under a new name and with plans for a new building. Sioux City television station KCAU says the Blackbird Bend Casino greeted old and new customers when it reopened its doors on January 12th. It was known as the Casino Omaha when it was shut down by Missouri River flooding during June of 2011. Blackbird Bend is temporarily located in the old restaurant of the casino. A new building will be built just southeast of the old casino and will be built 6 feet higher in case of future flooding. The new casino will have more than 150 employees. Construction is scheduled to begin in March and take about 13 months. Navajo leaders are meeting with energy experts to discuss alternatives to coal-heated homes there. The Farmington Daily Times reports that the meeting during a day-long conference at Dene College was featuring presentations by professors and analysts from around the country. The conference is part of the Shiprock In-Home Stove Coal Youth Project, which is funded by a $45,000 U.S. Environmental Protection Agency grant. Speakers will include members of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Navajo Nation, EPA, and the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority. Also, speakers were scholars from various universities interested in new and developing energy alternatives. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln is hosting an event with acclaimed Native American author, poet, and filmmaker Sherman Alexie. The free 2-day event will celebrate the winter issue of Prairie Schooner, the university's literary journal, and scheduled for January 28th and 29th at the Mary Ripma Ross Media Arts Center in Lincoln. Alexie frequently writes about his experiences growing up as a Native American. He has guest edited a portfolio of poetry and prose by contemporary Native American authors. The event begins January 28th with a screening of Smoke Signals, a film written and co-produced by Alexie. Alexie won't attend that screening, but he will read from his creative work on January 29th. The reading will be followed by an on-stage interview and a book signing as well. The Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes are trying to raise money to send a group of drummers, singers, and dancers to Washington, D.C. so Wyoming is not without representation at next week's presidential inaugural parade. Northern Arapaho tribal liaison Gary Collins said this week that the Presidential Inaugural Committee contacted him just over a week ago to let him know that Wyoming would be the only state not represented at the parade to mark President Barack Obama's second swearing-in ceremony unless he was able to organize a last-minute delegation. Collins reached out to both the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes, and they organized a group of at least 15 dancers and singers from the Wind River Reservation, a Democratic stronghold in a strongly Republican state. Collins said he has contacted business groups, the oil and gas industry, and fundraisers in Jackson. No one has committed to donating some of the $35,000 needed so far, but nobody has turned them down either. An account has been set up at Atlantic City Federal Credit Union there to accept donations. A federal appeals panel agrees the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa no longer has to give the city of Duluth a cut of its casino profits. The 8th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals January 14th upheld a 2011 ruling ending casino payments to Duluth, Minnesota. But the panel reversed U.S. District Court Judge Susan Nelson's ruling that the band must pay the city $12.4 million it has withheld since the dispute over casino revenue began in 2009. The Duluth News-Tribune reports that issue was sent back to Nelson for more decisions. The band had been sending the city 19% of its video game profits since it's opened its Duluth casino, Fond Duluth, in 1986. Duluth City Attorney Gunnar Johnson plans to ask the full appeals court to review the ruling. And that's going to be another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to say miigwech for joining with us and come back again soon.